As a web developer, you've probably heard of Stripe, a robust tool for handling payment transactions. But let's face it, navigating the Stripe website can feel like a jungle trek without a map, as it's become very bloated over the years. Figuring out how to create a payment form that matches your brand has been tricky, as Stripe has been pushing their checkout flow as well as the default Stripe payment element. In today's video, I want to demonstrate how to create a custom Stripe payment form that matches your website's look and feel by using React and TailwindCSS, two stacks that have exploded in popularity over the years. We will be working strictly with the front end, as I will show you how to generate a Stripe token which can then be used to collect a one-time payment, set up a subscription, or save a payment method to a customer. The code for this video will be linked to the iCodeStuff website in the description below. So without further ado, let's jump into the code and learn how to build your very own custom Stripe form with React and TailwindCSS. Before we begin, make sure you have npm and Node.js installed on your machine. You can head over to the Node.js website for installation instructions. With that out of the way, let's create our project using Vite. Within our terminal, let's type npm create vite at latest, and we'll call the directory react-stripe-form. When prompted, we want to select React and TypeScript. Now, let's cd into the directory, run npm install. Perfect, our npm dependencies have been installed. Now, let's open up VSCode. In today's video, I will be using VSCode with the Ayu Dark theme for those that are interested. Now, if we poke around, you can see we have a basic Vite React skeleton setup for us. So if we go to the source directory, we can see the main.tsx file, which is the entry point for our React application. Now, if we want to see it come to life, we can run npm run dev to start the server. And if we open up the browser, you will be greeted with the Vite welcome screen. Now let's set up the styles by integrating Tailwind CSS. We can follow the Tailwind and Vite guide on their website. As instructed, we want to install Tailwind CSS and its peer dependencies by typing the following command. Then we want to generate our Tailwind config and post CSS config by copying this command. Then we want to open up the Tailwind config.js file, and within the content array, we want to copy this snippet. Next, we want to head over to the index.css file and replace the entire code with the Tailwind CSS directives. Then, in our app.tsx file, we can remove the existing code and add the following code and save the file. Now, let's restart the dev server. And if we head over to the browser, we can now see the updated Tailwind CSS code being applied. Now we want to install the React stripe.js package, which will contain the React components for stripe.js and its Stripe elements. We can do so by going to the React stripe.js repository, and we can copy this command right here to install both packages. This will install the React stripe.js package and the regular stripe.js package. Next, before we set up the Stripe elements boilerplate, we want to create a component called payment form, which will be a tsx file, payment form.tsx. And then we'll just export a default function called payment form, and we will just put some placeholder code at the moment and say an h1 tag, and this will be payment form here, and save. Now in our app.tsx file, we want to import the load stripe function. So we'll create a const stripe equals load stripe, and this will take in the public key, which you can get from the Stripe dashboard. Here we are within the Stripe dashboard, and I'm just going to copy the public key. Actually, I want to go to test mode first, and then I want to copy the test key, and I will paste it here. Perfect. Let's grab the elements file or component, pass in Stripe as a prop. Then we want to wrap our payment form component that we just created. And it won't take any children, so we can just use the component shortcut. Perfect. Now let's head back to our payment form.tsx file, and in the browser we can see the payment form here. We will want to now design the payment form component. We can start by importing both the Stripe, the use Stripe, and use element hooks. So we'll say const stripe equals use stripe, const elements equals use elements. Then we want to use state for both the name and the postal code. So we'll say const name set name equals use state, and we'll put an empty string for the initial state variable, and we will do the same for the postal code and set postal code and use state. Now let's begin the process of designing the payment form. We can start by wrapping the component with a parent div, then create a comment. This will be our card background. And because we are using Tailwind config or Tailwind CSS, we can see the styles being applied in real time. So we want to create a div, and we want to make it a relative object or relative div. Let's add some padding, and we'll make it max width of large, and we'll MX auto it so that we'll center it on our screen. Perfect. Now let's set up the actual card form. So we'll say div class name. We'll say BG white. We'll say PX8 for padding horizontal. Then for padding Y, we'll give it 6. And we want to make it rounded large. And let's give it an extra large shadow. Okay. Then we want to add our form. And just to get an idea of what it looks like, let's just add hello. Okay, so we're looking at the actual foundation for the card being set up. This looks good so far. For our form inputs, we're gonna want to space it by about 4 rem, I'd say. So let's do space Y4. And I'm actually gonna move this to the form, and we'll move this div at the moment. All right, and then we want to create our card number, and I'm gonna move this over here so we can actually see what's going on. Cool. So let's create a div for our card number. We don't need any classes. We'll put a label, and we'll say class name. It's gonna be block. We want some small text and add some medium font. You know, it's not gonna be bold, but medium should work. And then add a margin bottom. And we will call this card number. Cool, so that looks good. Now, let's import the card number element from Stripe. And then we'll pass in a class name, and we want to make it small text again. We'll do that. For the actual text color, let's make it gray. We'll say 700. And then we'll make it BG white. Let's add a border to it. Let's make it rounded too. And then for that, let's add an ID too, because we need the ID for the element. So we'll say ID, and we'll say this is the card number, and then for HTML4, and the actual ID will be here, and we'll say card number, and let's do that, save it. Okay, so it kind of looks like a card form. Let's add some padding to it. So we'll do padding, say 2, or let's do 3 for horizontal. Let's make it 2 for vertical. Okay, looks kind of good. For the border color though, let's make it a little darker. We'll say border gray 300. Okay, looks good. And 42, 42, 42. Okay, that looks good so far. Now let's do the same for the card date. And we'll say card expiration element. and we'll say card expiration, card X, and then card X. And we'll save that, check it out. Okay, this looks good. All right, and it's being validated by the stripe.js package, so that looks good. Let's try something instead of 4242. Let's do 424242 4040. Okay, that looks good. All right, so let's copy this again, and we'll do the same for the card CVC. Say card CVC element, and we'll say this is the CVC. We'll save that, and it should be a maximum of 4 characters. So let's test that out. Okay, and if we, actually let's do 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and I can't type anymore. So that's validated there. Awesome. Now let's copy this, and we're gonna remove the card CVC element, and we're gonna make it an input. And this is gonna be for our name. So we'll say this is name, or let's say customer name, and customer name, do name. Okay, and then we actually need to handle the state change. Let's say on change, we'll say E, and we're going to set our name state variable to the e.target-value. And then for the value itself, we want to bind it to the name state variable. Okay, so this looks good. So testing. Let's add a placeholder. We'll say your name. And I prefer to make it with full, like the other ones. I'll save that. Okay, that looks good. Now, let's do the same for the zip code. And we'll save that. We'll say your zip, or let's actually say postal code. And your postal code. And instead of name, we will say postal code, and we'll say set postal code. Cool. So this looks good. Now we just need a submit button. So let's create a button, and we can make it flex. We'll say items are centered. What color do we want to make it? Let's make it indigo. Indigo 600, and let's give it 2. No, let's do 3 for the horizontal padding, and then 2 for the vertical padding, and then we'll say save payment method. Now let's save it. Okay, that doesn't look so good. So let's make it text white. And let's round this out, and let's make it a full width. I'd like the text to be center, so let's do text center. That doesn't look right. What are we missing? Text center. Oh, we need justify center. Here we go. We can add some hover elements, but we don't need to do that right now. Okay, so we have all of the form. If we try to submit this though, it looks like we actually need some required fields. So let's make these inputs required. And we'll do the same for this. And if we try to submit the form, it'll tell us that it is required. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we want to create a function to generate the Stripe token. So let's create a function, and this is going to be an async function. So let's say generate, if I know how to spell generate Stripe token, and this is going to be async, arrow function. We don't have any parameters, so we can remove that. So we first want to check that the Stripe and elements constants are set. If they aren't set, that means we got to end the function early because we won't be able to actually create the token. So if not stripe, or if not elements, let's break out of this. So we'll say return early. And if I know how to spell return, and we'll say console log stripe/elements is not set. Okay. Next, we want to create a constant for the card number element itself. And then we'll create elements.getElement. And we want to use the card number element. Perfect. And then using some destructuring, we want to grab the token from the create token. Const token error from the await stripe-create token. And this token will be the key to do whatever we want. We can either save a customer's payment method, we can collect a one-time payment intent, we can create a subscription, we can really do anything with this token, but you can only use it once. So I would personally recommend that you save the customer's payment method so that you can charge them later on down the road, instead of creating a one-time payment intent, because if you create a one-time payment intent, you won't be able to use that token again, and so the customer will have to put in their card number details again, which can get really annoying. But if we continue on, let's pass in the card number element, and then for our options, we'll pass in a name. We'll say, this will use our full name variable, or our state name variable. And for the address zip, we'll pass in our postal code. Okay. What are we getting? So we're getting some issues with the card number element. So this can either be null. What if we do some TypeScript magic and say as stripe card number element? Does it complain? Oh, so it likes that. Okay, that's cool. So we want to return the token, but we first want to ensure that the token is set. So if the token is not set, or if there's an error, we want to return early. And we'll say console.log, and we'll say console the error, or we'll just say token is not set. Otherwise, we're just going to throw that error early to break out of the function. So if the token is set though, and there isn't an error, we just want to return the token. Perfect. All right, so now that we have our generate stripe token method, we want to use that within our submit method for when we submit the form. So let's create a function called handle submit, and this will take in a form event. And the first thing we want to do is we want to prevent the default. You've probably seen this if you've used React a lot. This will prevent the form from causing a page reload. We'll say, here we are. Now, let's grab the token, or actually let's wrap this in a try catch block. So let's try to generate a token, say await. And let's make this an async function. We'll say await generate stripe token. And if it is successful, we will alert the token.id, I believe. And then let's catch any errors, and we'll just alert that there was an error. So we'll say catch E, and we will alert, or actually let's just console it out. So console log, we'll say error and error. Okay, or not error, but E. Or let's make this more descriptive. It's ERR and ERR. There we go. Okay, cool. And then if we go to the submit or on submit, we can bind our handle submit. And let's save this. Let's refresh the page. Okay, so let's put 424242 and let's put in a future date, and we'll do 4242 again, and we will say John Doe, and let's try to save the payment method. Okay, perfect. We just created a Stripe token, and this can be used on the back end. I will create a video to show you how you can create that Stripe subscription, how you can create a payment method for the customer, how you can create an actual customer object, and so on and so forth. This is just like a key to do whatever you want on the back end. And just remember that you can only use the token once, so you need to use it wisely. Okay, so the happy path works just fine. Let's try to use a card that doesn't work. So now we have a card that isn't supposed to work. So let's try to save payment method. Okay, here we are. So telling us your card number is invalid. If we wanted to make this realistic, we'd probably have an object, a state object, and we'll say error. We'll say form errors, and we'll say set form errors, and this will just be an empty object. Use state, passed in an empty object. Okay. And then we can probably pass in, or actually, let's just do form error message just to make it easy. In reality, you'd probably use a React library like React Formic or the millions of other React form libraries out there. So say set form error message, and this will be null by default. And because we're going to be changing it to a string later, we have to say to TypeScript that this can be both a string or a null. Okay. And then in our catch block, we will say set form error message, and we'll pass in the error message like so. And just in case this doesn't exist, we'll just say something went wrong. Okay. It's yelling at me, and I don't like that. All right, well, either way, I am going to put a label above the button, and this label will only be set if form error message exists. So we'll say, and we'll do label, and for our class name, let's add some margin on both sides, my2, make the text pretty small, and we'll make the text red, and we'll say 500, and we will put our form error message as so. Save that. Let's go through the process again. Just put a wrong card in. Solomon 11206, and let's save payment method. Okay, your card number is invalid. All right, well, what if we try to put 424242 and we put an old date, your card. Okay, so this works just as intended. So this is how you create a Stripe form with React and TailwindCSS. You don't have to do it the way that I did it with the TailwindCSS. You're free to design it however your brand inputs look. If you're using Storybook, you might want it to be in line with your Storybook designs, but either way, this allows you to customize the Stripe inputs so that it can match your brand instead of using the default Stripe card number element that looks very generic and very specific to Stripe. And it kind of lets everybody else know that, hey, this company's using Stripe elements, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it might not fit your brand.